Yo guys, what is going on? It is Invin here, and today what I'm bringing to you guys is a video on some of the perk updates and also some brand new perks that we are going to be seeing with the May update. Now the first list that I'm going to look through here is the perk changes to current and existing perks that we have seen in the May PTR notes, and of course will be coming to us with the live version of this game when it does eventually drop towards the end of the month here. And then I'm also going to jump into some of the brand new perks, a lot of them PvP specific, that were added with this patch as well, or at least so far, so we can have a look at those, particularly bearing in mind the 3v3 arenas, as that is the intention of a lot of these perks and that's where they're really going to shine through. But there is a lot of exciting stuff to cover here, some pretty big changes to some of the existing perks as well as adding into these new ones into that pool. So yeah, lot to cover here, and it is pretty exciting indeed. Now, before we jump into today's video fully, if you are new to the channel and you want to see more New World content, please do make sure that you go down below and drop a subscribe to the channel. And if you do go on to enjoy today's video and find it useful to keep you in the loop with all of the updates and latest news from New World, please do drop me a like as well, as both of those things massively help to support my channel and my content here on YouTube. Without further ado, let's firstly jump into this perk changes list. So this is of course from the update release notes, which are on the PTR section of the New World forums. For any of you that do want to have a look through these notes yourself, they will as always be linked in the description of today's video. But firstly, we're looking here at Critical Retribution. This one is where they have fixed an issue where the tooltip cooldown were not showing the accurate value, so essentially just smoothing up the description to match the actual values of the game. Then you've got Efficient Burnout. This one is where they have fixed an issue where the buff applied by this perk was using debug text. Again, just cleaning up some little bugs here and there with these, which is good. Elemental Attunement, they have fixed an issue where this perk was not triggering from all abilities or off all abilities. Now this should be the case, so essentially this has had a buff because it now will happen in every instance where it should. Also with Elemental Attunement, they have updated the tooltip to add clarification as to why it might not work off certain abilities. So there is still going to be some that may be exempt to this, but generally it's been buffed overall. Now, Elemental Damage Gems, what they've done with these is fixed an issue that caused certain abilities to have their total damage lowered when these gems were equipped. So now we should be seeing the gems fixed. It should be the tier 5 ones are the best, and they're not going to lower the damage of abilities or anything like that when you've got them equipped, which is fantastic. Then we're looking at Freedom. Firstly, they've fixed an issue where this perk was not specifying that it affected root, which it does. And they've also removed Silence from the tooltip, as the only silence currently present in the game are AoEs and their duration cannot be modified. Which is interesting, it says currently present as well, maybe hinting towards some future progression content there. But as we know right now, that is what Freedom is going to be doing. Then we're looking here to Gathering Efficiency, which is this one right here, where it says they have increased the effectiveness of this perk from 5 all the way up to 20% and 25 up to 100%, and updated the tooltips to indicate that the speed increase is a percent of the base speed rather than a total increase. Now, Insatiable Gravity Well, we've seen some big changes to here. Firstly, they have fixed an issue where this perk was triggering 2 instances of damage. Secondly, they've reduced the damage burst from 125% down to 100%. They've reduced the lifesteal amount from 20 to 50% based on gear score to 15 to 35% based on gear score. So right up that top end there, you're going to see 35% instead of 50. So it's a 15% lifesteal reduction overall. And they have also reduced the block stamina damage to secondary burst players to prevent the double trigger of the effect being too powerful against blocking players. So overall, I have had quite a bit of experience with this, particularly in the arenas on the PTR, and it does feel a lot more balanced. Yes, it's not quite as good for us Great Axe users, and it is kind of like, oh, it feels a bit less powerful. However, overall, for the full kind of ecosystem of the combat, if you will, in this game, it does feel a lot better, and particularly in light armor, you've got enough ground to cover to mainly get out of these pulls, not be absolutely one-bursted down by them. So it has been working a lot better, at least in a small scale. I would have to try this in Wars as well to give my full opinion, but it seems to be a much better change now, even though, as someone who mains the Great Axe, this is a shame to see it reduced. It did need to be done, I think, for the fairness of the overall game. Now we're just looking at the Blunderbuss. Now, They've also changed Keen Vault Kick here for the Spear, which is where they fixed an issue that allowed the Vault Kick ability to apply the buff associated with this perk when the perk was not equipped. So now you do actually need the Keen Vault Kick to get your Keen application. Mortal Empowerment, they have fixed an issue where the player could bring the empowered bonus onto other game modes. Nullifying Oblivion, they have fixed an issue where this perk would remove effects from persistent AoEs. So again, just tidying up that Oblivion, making sure it's not getting rid of things that it shouldn't be doing, such as Fortifying Sacred Ground, which now should no longer be the case. Plagued Crits, we've seen 3 changes to here. Firstly, they fixed a spelling error in the description. Secondly, they have fixed an issue with this perk's description as it appears in the trading post. And thirdly, they have fixed an issue where this perk was only applying from random crits and not from headshots or backstabs. Now, first two are pretty nondescript. It is literally just typo fixes, description updates, etc. However, this third one is really, really crucial. So essentially what it means now is random crits will apply Plagued Crits as well as headshots and backstabs, which wasn't the case before, which is kind of what made this like not that great. Now this is probably going to be a really sought after perk, particularly in PvE. It's going to be super good if there is any healing mobs. Maybe Tempest, I'm looking at that, but overall there is better things to have. However, in PvP, particularly I'm looking towards the arenas with this comment. It's probably going to be a really good one to have if they do have a healer, or if they don't in the arena situation. It's really, really going to help them to get less heals, particularly if you're able to do it off headshots. I think the bows are going to be really good, but also, of course, looking there at the great axes, at the hatchets, the spears, getting backstabs with these can be super easy if you have got some CC, which most of these weapons come with, so that could be a really, really sought after perk. And then finally down the bottom here, we've got a couple more changes, which firstly apply to Pylon Burst, where they have fixed an issue where the AoE burst from this perk could not be blocked. Now it can. And finally, Trenchant Rend, they have fixed an issue where the debuff applied was incorrectly labelled as Frost Attunement. Now, obviously, this will be the Rend instead. So some pretty interesting updates, but like I said at the start of the video, that is not it. We also have some brand new perks that have been added to the game specifically for PvP and other stuff that we're now going to cover. So as you guys will be able to see, I am on New World Database for this one, so shout out to the guys over there for compiling this list. But of course, this is, as you can see, a list of all the new ones added, and they are PvP only perks. Now, bear in mind, this means they will not work in your elite runs, they won't work in expeditions, they won't work in mob grinding, whatever you want to do. It's PvP only, which means duels, yes, it means 3v3 arenas, outpost rush, wars, open world PvP, and, you know, other stuff potentially in the future as well. So these are kind of a specific mentality. You've got to look at them from the position of how they're going to work, especially in the 3v3 arena, as obviously this is the patch they're being added with. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Now, the first one here, we're looking at Penetrating Backstab. This one is where backstabs penetrate 10% of the player's armor. This one is a super, super good one. A lot of people having some great success with this so far in the PTR. It isn't a ridiculously overpowered thing from what we can tell so far, but it is super effective when players have it on, and it does really work well against those heavy, you know, 300 con medium players, or worse still, 300 con heavy players. You can actually start to bring them down to size a little bit, which is really good. Then you have the Penetrating Headshot. This one is where headshots penetrate 7% of the player's armor, and this one is really, really good for muskets and for bows, especially with the bow kind of buff that we've seen with the weapon changes that I covered yesterday in yesterday's upload. This is actually pretty crazy, and probably again going to be a very sought after perk for the bow, and with good reason. It's super, super useful. We've then got Fractured Rend. This one here is when block breaking a player inflict rend, reducing the damage absorption by 12% for 4 seconds. So a 12% rend for 4 seconds, which makes this pretty good, and it is going to be great on things like the Warhammer when you've got the perk Armor Breaker, so that when you do break the block, that does significantly large amounts of block breakage and stamina damage, and therefore paired with some of the other perks that we have already existing in New World, this one is pretty good. Then we're looking at Purifying Crits. This one is where critical hits against players remove 1 buff from the target. Now it does have a 10-second cooldown, so you can't go ham with the hatchet or the spear combos. However, 10-second cooldown, you can keep getting rid of buffs. This is going to be really, really good. Now, touch wood, so far we haven't seen this affect things like food or honing stones, or at least I haven't. However, Let's hope that that isn't the case, and it is going to be quite annoying to play against, particularly in the small scale arenas where the buffs are really important, but it is going to add that extra level of skill to reapply buffs, especially as a healer, which I think is quite nice. And again, it does give a chance to kill the healers if they're in the Fortify and Sacred Ground. You hit them with that, you get rid of the Fortify, you can kill them a lot easier with just the heals rather than the Fortify buff on there as well, so it is quite a nice addition. We've then got Exhaustive Exploitation, which is where hits against exhausted players inflict slow, reducing movement speed by 15% for 4 seconds. Now, again, with the changes to the way that dodging and stamina regen work in the new patch, if you guys haven't seen, it kind of takes a few seconds before you start to regen stamina after you've dodged, so you will actually have to not dodge again, or if you do double dodge, you're going to be fully exhausted, and a lot of players have been running into this problem fairly often. So using this one to then slow them down and be able to secure that kill if they don't relearn essentially what the dodge timers are is going to be super hard hitting, and I think again is going to be a super popular perk to have. Then we've got Alacritus Punishment. This one is where you deal 8% additional damage to players with haste. So again, we're looking at the bow, we're looking at the musket, we're looking at the rapier. All of those things there will be a great thing that you can apply extra damage for, but it's also going to affect gameplay with things like Beacon. If you're going to run Beacon as a healer, you don't want the speed upgrade, because then that means your team is taking extra damage if someone has this perk on. So as you can see, they kind of up and down affect the gameplay in different ways, and I actually really like this addition. We've then got Sturdy Fortification. This one is where blocking player attacks adds a stack of 4% Fortify for 5 seconds on the self for each blocked hit, and this can stack up to 5 times, so 5 times 4, we're looking at 20% Fortify for 5 seconds, and of course if you keep blocking, this is going to keep going up, and this is a really good one to let people get involved with the Sword and Shield. We've seen a lot of really good DPS, light and medium builds with the Sword and Shield that have actually done really well, and I think with this perk on will be even stronger, but it's also going to mean heavy armored tanks might see a return into the meta. With things like this being available, it's pretty exciting to see. Now, Shuriken Heals, this one is one of my favourites and is super good in the arena specifically, but this one is where successfully dodging an attack heals for 100 health plus 1% of your max HP. But this one is slightly different because each armor piece with this perk adds a stack and can only be triggered once every 5 seconds. But essentially, you can have 5 times this, which would be base 500 HP, plus 1%, we're looking at maybe 120-ish, let's say, for the average player. So maybe 220 times 5, we're looking at around the 1,200 health mark there. So it's not a huge increment, but overall it is going to be a pretty decent amount. And, you know, if you've got it stacked up on several pieces, you can actually start to see a decent bit of survivability from this if you get your dodges on point. But like I said, once every 5 seconds, although to be honest, that is pretty quick and it is really good. Like I said, one of my favourites, so that's a really good one as well. Then we've got Siege Ward here, which is where you receive 6% less damage from siege weapons. I think without them increasing the incentive to use the siege weapons in OPR and the kind of relative uselessness of this, it is maybe okay in wars from time to time, but there is, again, overall better perks. I don't think this one's going to be too popular. However, going forward in new modes, new things that we may see, this could become more prevalent and more important, so we'll hold our full judgment on that until we see what the update as a whole has to offer, and of course future content as well. Mortal Empowerment then is the next one down, which is where player kills grant a persistent 2% damage bonus that lasts until downed, death, or game mode transitions, and this does count as round to round in the arenas. Duration refreshes on reapplication, and it stacks up to 15 times. This effect cannot be cleansed. So essentially, what happens is you can get a 2% damage bonus if you get a full player kill in OPR and in wars. This is going to be super good until you get downed, death, or game mode transition, so in between rounds on arenas. So it can be good. You can get an extra 2, 4, or even 6%, but it won't count for any kills by the end of it. But if you're looking at wars, you can get up to 15 times, so you're going to get a plus 30% damage bonus with this in OPRs and in wars if you go on basically what is going to be a kill streak. And this will keep continuously going. Duration refreshes on reapplication, so you can keep getting it up and up and up and sticking at those 15 stacks, so 30% extra damage. This is going to be pretty nuts, and stacking this on someone like a ranged DPS that tries to stay alive if they've got a squad protecting them, we could really see some crazy plays going on with this new perk. Next, second to last one here is the Invigorated Punishment. This one is where abilities deal 3% bonus damage per buff on a player for a maximum of 8 buffs. Now again, this is going to cause some serious damage to some of the tanks, but also some of the other players like your light bruisers and of course your mages when you've got all of your different buffs up. Also, we've seen changes to the healing bonuses for buffs, so the more you have, you actually get less % overall bonus than you did before. So this is going to mean you can really tear down people with buffs a little bit easier, and it's going to give kind of a direct counter to that increased healing. So this is going to be an interesting one. Haven't really seen this used too much in the PTR yet, but it does sound like it could be quite a tricksy one again, particularly for those wars and outpost rush matches that do last a little bit longer. Now finally here we've got Shirking Empower. This one is after successfully dodging an attack, obtain Empower, increasing damage dealt by 4% for 10 seconds. Duration refreshes when a new stack is applied, and it stacks up to 4 times. So dodging an attack, essentially you can dodge up to 4 in a row, which will give you a 16% damage increase for 10 seconds, and every time you dodge another attack this will refresh those stacks. So this can be quite powerful, and again, if you're running away from someone and then want to turn on them and do a counter attack, particularly looking at the arenas, this can be some serious extra damage that can really start to win you those fights, those 1v1s, 2v1s, or even 3v1s with the amount of damage that this gives you extra. Again, in the wars and the larger scale PvP modes, this is going to be pretty crazy. So overall, some interesting perks, and certainly some ones that are going to be very, very powerful and very, very sought after. Now, just as a side note to these, the way that you're going to get most of these is going to be on the brand new gear from the PvP reward tracks, which you will need to level up to access all of it, but some of it will be available right from the rip, so that is going to be the main way that you can get them. I would imagine that at some point we're going to see craft mods for these potentially, but right now if we look on where you can actually obtain these, it is just on things like, for example, this one right here, we're looking at Penetrating Backstab, is just on some of these brand new weapons, which are obtained here, you can see as a PvP reward, so they are going to be pretty good, and they are at the 3rd checkpoint for 4,500 Azoth Salt. So yeah, you are going to need to get the rewards for the brand new PvP tracks in order to get your hands on these. Not going to be craft modded off the start, it looks like, so you are going to want to level that up, and that's how you're going to get access to them. So basically, more PvPing is going to reward you with better PvP only perks, but is also going to reward those players that grind it out the most, which I think is quite a cool thing, and is almost like another incentive to keep playing these modes, which is pretty cool. But that is going to be it for today's video, guys, so I would like to thank you for watching. Hopefully you have enjoyed and found this video useful to keep you updated on all of the latest updates and changes to the current perks, as well as give you guys the lowdown on the latest new additional perks to the game that we've seen so far. Now, of course, if we do get additional notes on any more perks or any more additions before this patch goes live, I will be sure to update you guys here on the channel. So do make sure if you have enjoyed today's video, you're dropping a subscribe and a like, as both of those things massively help to support me and my content here on YouTube. And other than that, I will catch you guys again very, very shortly on a brand new upload. So thanks for your time, thank you for watching, take care, and peace.